I rushed outside to wave the ambulance in, only to find my neighbor Deborah's SUV deliberately blocking my driveway while my mom struggled to breathe inside. How was I supposed to know that when this power-hungry HOA president refused to move her car for the paramedics, she'd soon discover exactly who my mother really was? Comment below where you're watching from. I never expected my quiet life in Pinecrest Estates to turn into a war zone. But when you're up against Deborah Williams, the most feared HOA president in the county, normal rules don't apply. It all started 3 weeks ago. I was helping my mom bring her suitcases into my house after picking her up from the hospital. She'd just had major back surgery, and her doctor said she needed someone to take care of her for at least 2 months. As her only child, I wasn't about to let her down. "Are you sure this isn't too much trouble, honey?" Mom asked as I carried her medical equipment inside. She winced with each step, her face pale from the pain medication. "Of course not," I replied, trying to sound more cheerful than I felt. Truth was, I was worried sick about her. "The guest room is all set up. We'll get you comfortable in no time." That's when I noticed a woman in a crisp pantsuit watching us from across the street. She had perfectly styled blonde hair and wore the kind of fake smile that makes your skin crawl. "Who's that?" Mom whispered, noticing my stare. "Deborah Williams, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood sheriff," I explained. "Just ignore her." But ignoring Deborah wasn't possible, as I'd soon find out. The very next morning, while Mom was still asleep, I found a bright orange notice taped to my front door. "Violation, unauthorized resident change. All new residents must be approved by the HOA board. Fine, 100-day until resolved." I ripped it down before Mom could see it. Last thing she needed was stress during recovery. I'd simply explained that Mom was a temporary guest, not a new resident. Reasonable people understand family emergencies, right? Wrong. By that afternoon, my phone was blowing up with texts from Tom, my neighbor, and the only decent person on the HOA board. "Deborah called emergency board meeting about your mom," his message read. "Says medical equipment damages neighborhood aesthetic. Watch your back." I peeked out my window to see Deborah walking door to door with a clipboard, stopping to chat with neighbors while pointing at my house. My blood boiled, but I kept my cool. Mom needed calm, not chaos. That evening, while helping Mom with her physical therapy exercises, the doorbell rang. There stood Deborah, flanked by 2 other board members. "We need to discuss your unauthorized resident," Deborah announced, trying to peek past me into the house. "And the commercial medical equipment that's been delivered without proper approval forms." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "My mother is recovering from surgery. She's a temporary guest, not a new resident." Deborah's eyes narrowed. "Our bylaws clearly state that any stay over 14 days constitutes residency. And Section 8, Paragraph 3 prohibits visible medical equipment. She's my mother, for heaven's sake. She needs help recovering." "Rules are rules," Deborah replied with a shrug. "You should have submitted the proper paperwork. The board will need to inspect the premises and interview your guest." That's when I lost it. "Absolutely not. My mother is resting. You will not disturb her. Then you leave us no choice but to begin enforcement proceedings." She handed me another notice. "This is a formal warning. You have 48 hours to remove unauthorized equipment and resident, or daily fines begin." After they left, I sat on the porch steps, trying to calm down before going back inside. My phone buzzed with another text from Tom. "Deborah's on the warpath. She's been taking photos of your mom's equipment being delivered. Says it's evidence. I didn't tell Mom about any of this. She'd always been the strong one, the one who fixed problems, not caused them." As I helped her into bed that night, she smiled weakly. "Everything okay, sweetheart? You seem worried." "Just tired," I lied. "Get some rest." The next morning, I called a lawyer friend who specialized in property law. She laughed when I told her about Deborah's threats. "They can't prevent family members from staying during medical recovery," she explained. "That would violate state family care laws. And the equipment? Protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Deborah doesn't have a leg to stand on." Armed with this knowledge, I prepared a formal response letter. But before I could deliver it, another orange notice appeared, this time with final warning stamped across it. Later that day, I spotted Deborah photographing Mom through our living room window while she napped on the couch. That was the final straw. I marched over to her house and knocked firmly on her door. When she answered, I handed her my lawyer's letter. "This explains why your demands are illegal. My mother is staying, the equipment is staying, and if you harass us again, we'll file a formal complaint." Deborah's smile never faltered. "Oh dear, threats now? That's another violation." She leaned in close. "You must be new here. Nobody wins against me. I've forced out 3 families this year alone." A cold feeling washed over me. This wasn't about rules, it was about power. That night, Mom's breathing seemed off. The surgery had affected her lung capacity, and her medication had side effects the doctors had warned about. I checked her oxygen levels regularly, worried but trying not to show it. "I'm fine," she insisted. "Just need to adjust to these pills." But I couldn't shake my worry. I set up a makeshift bed in her room, just to keep an eye on her through the night. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of Mom gasping for air. Her oxygen monitor was beeping, levels dropping dangerously low. I rushed to adjust her position, helping her sit up while reaching for my phone. "Hang on, Mom, I'm calling an ambulance." Her eyes were wide with fear as she clutched my hand. This wasn't just a medication reaction. Something was seriously wrong. As I gave our address to the 911 dispatcher, I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I spotted Deborah's SUV backing into a position that completely blocked my driveway. What I didn't know then was that Deborah had installed security, cameras pointed at my house, had seen the lights come on in the middle of the night, and had decided this was the perfect moment to make her point. As Mom's breathing grew more labored, I saw headlights approaching. The ambulance was almost here. But how would they get to us with Deborah's SUV blocking the only direct path to our door? Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a battle that would shock our entire community and reveal a secret about my mother that even I hadn't fully appreciated until now. That Thursday night started like any other. I was making dinner while Mom rested on the couch, her breathing machine humming quietly in the background. The pasta was just about done when I heard a strange gasping sound from the living room. "Mom?" I called out, turning down the stove. When I rushed in, my heart nearly stopped. Mom's face had turned an awful gray color. Her hands clutched at her chest, and she couldn't seem to get enough air. "Can't breathe," she wheezed, eyes wide with fear. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. "My mother can't breathe! She just had heart surgery last month. Please hurry!" The dispatcher's calm voice kept me focused. "Ambulance is 6 minutes out. Is she conscious? Can you get her into a sitting position?" I propped Mom up with pillows while staying on the line. Her breathing was getting worse by the second. The 6 minutes felt like 6 hours. "They're on their way, Mom. Just hold on," I whispered, holding her hand. When I heard sirens in the distance, relief washed over me. "I'm going to guide them in," I told Mom, squeezing her hand before rushing toward the front door. I flipped on all the outside lights and ran down the driveway to wave the ambulance in. That's when I noticed something that made my blood boil. A massive black SUV was parked sideways, completely blocking my driveway entrance. I recognized it immediately, Deborah's brand new Escalade. The ambulance slowed at our street, lights flashing. But the driver looked confused when he saw the blocked entrance. He pulled over to the side of the road, about 50 yards from my house. "Over here!" I shouted, waving frantically. "My mom's inside, but you'll have to park there and bring the stretcher." The paramedics jumped out, grabbing their equipment. "Why can't we pull in?" one asked. "Someone's blocking my driveway," I explained. "Already heading toward Deborah's house next door. I'll get them to move it now." I pounded on Deborah's door with both fists, not caring about her precious noise regulations now. "Deborah, move your car immediately! There's an emergency!" After what felt like forever, the porch light clicked on. Deborah appeared in her silk bathrobe, hair in curlers, a face mask half peeled off. If the situation wasn't so serious, her appearance might have been funny. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" she hissed. "The HOA quiet hours begin at 9 p.m. And it's 9:42. This is going in my report." I pointed to the ambulance. "My mother can't breathe. She needs to go to the hospital right now. Your car is blocking my driveway." Deborah glanced at the ambulance, then back at me. Instead of rushing for her keys, she crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. "This area is for residents only. No commercial vehicles without 48-hour written notice. It's in the bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 8. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious? That's an ambulance. My mother might be dying in there." "Should have followed the rules," she smirked, making no move for her keys. "Actions have consequences." Behind me, I could see the paramedics were already wheeling their stretcher the long way around, through the neighbor's yard. They were losing precious time because of this woman's power trip. "You realize you're breaking the law right now?" I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Move your car or I'll have it towed." Deborah laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "With what authority?" "I'm the HOA president. I know exactly what my rights are." Just then, her husband Frank appeared behind her. "What's going on?" he asked, looking concerned when he spotted the ambulance. "Their unauthorized resident is having some sort of episode," Deborah said with a dismissive wave, "and they're demanding I move my car, which is parked legally." Frank's eyes widened. "Deborah, that's an ambulance. Just give me the keys." "Don't you dare," she snapped. "This family has violated 3 separate HOA regulations. They need to learn." I didn't have time for this. The paramedics had reached my front door. I ran back to help them with Mom. Inside, they were already placing an oxygen mask over her face. Her lips had a bluish tint that terrified me. BP's 170 over 100. Pulse ox 82, one paramedic called out. We need to transport now. The driveway's blocked, his partner said. We'll have to carry her to the rig. I watched helplessly as they transferred Mom to the stretcher. Each minute felt like it was stealing more of her life away. As they carefully navigated the front steps, I saw Deborah had followed me. She stood on my lawn with a clipboard in hand, actually writing something down. This medical transport wasn't approved by the board, she announced. And your garden gnome violates Section 5 of the Lawn Ornament Guidelines. One of the paramedics shot her a disbelieving look as they struggled to wheel the stretcher across the uneven grass, avoiding sprinkler heads. Lady, someone's life is at stake here, he said sharply. Rules are rules, Deborah insisted, stepping directly in their path. I'll need to see some identification before you remove a resident from the premises. That's when Mom's eyes fluttered open briefly. Despite her condition, she reached for her purse, which I'd grabbed before leaving the house. Ma'am, we need to go now, the paramedic insisted, trying to maneuver around Deborah. Show them, Mom whispered to me, her eyes flicking to her wallet. I unzipped her purse and pulled out her ID wallet, confused about what she wanted me to do. When I opened it, I froze. There, next to her driver's license, was a gold badge I'd seen thousands of times throughout my childhood, but somehow had forgotten to mention to anyone in the neighborhood. As Deborah planted herself in front of the stretcher, complaint form in hand, I stepped forward. Deborah, meet my mother, I said, holding up the badge so it caught the light from the ambulance. Chief Sandra Martinez, Boston Police Department. The paramedic's eyes widened in recognition, and Deborah's mouth fell open. Chief Martinez? One of the paramedics said. From the South District? Mom managed a weak nod as they finally reached the ambulance. Why didn't you say something? The paramedic asked me as they loaded her in. I didn't think I needed to announce my mother's occupation for her to receive. Emergency medical care? I replied, loud enough for Deborah to hear. The paramedic immediately got on his radio. Dispatch, be advised we're transporting Chief Martinez to Boston General. Request police escort. Deborah stood frozen on my lawn, the color draining from her face as the implications sank in. Obstructing emergency services was serious enough. Doing it to the chief of police was career suicide. As I climbed into the ambulance beside Mom, I caught a glimpse of Deborah's face through the closing doors. For the first time since I'd moved in, she looked scared. The ambulance pulled away with sirens blaring, and I held Mom's hand as the oxygen slowly brought color back to her face. But even as I focused on her, one thought kept running through my mind. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As we sped toward the hospital, I saw blue lights in the distance coming to meet us, the police escort arriving. Mom squeezed my hand weakly. Did you see her face? Mom whispered behind her oxygen mask. When she realized who I am? I nodded, surprised Mom could think about that now. Just rest, please. Mom shook her head slightly. 27 years enforcing the law. Never thought I'd need to fight for my own emergency care. The paramedic checked her vitals again. BP's coming down. Chief, try not to talk, okay? As we merged onto the highway with police cruisers now flanking us, I wondered what would happen when we returned home. Would Deborah apologize? Would she face consequences? Or was this just the beginning of a war I never wanted to fight? My heart pounded as the paramedics struggled to wheel the stretcher around Deborah's giant SUV. Mom's face was turning a scary shade of blue. Every second wasted could mean the difference between life and death. And this woman was standing there with her arms crossed like she was guarding a castle. You need to move your car right now, I shouted, my voice cracking. Deborah lifted her chin. I told you already, this is a private community. All emergency services need prior approval from the board. One of the paramedics, a tall guy named Mike according to his name tag, stepped forward. Ma'am, we're responding to an emergency call. It's actually against the law to block emergency vehicles. And it's against our community bylaws to have unauthorized residents. She shot back, pulling out her phone. I'm documenting everything for our records. The board will review this incident. I wanted to scream. My mom was getting worse by the second. And this woman was taking pictures for some stupid HOA meeting? The other paramedic was already checking Mom's oxygen levels, his face serious. BP dropping. We need to move now, he said to his partner. That's when Mom's eyes fluttered open, even struggling to breathe. She had that look I'd seen my whole life, the one that said she wasn't going down without a fight. She weakly raised her hand, pointing to her purse that I'd grabbed in the rush. What does she want? Mike asked, already preparing to lift the stretcher. I dug through Mom's purse, not sure what she needed. Mom, we need to get you to the hospital right away. Her fingers weakly formed a gesture I recognized from childhood. She was miming opening a wallet. That's when it clicked. I pulled out her wallet and opened it, revealing her badge and ID. Check. ID. she managed to whisper before her eyes closed again. Deborah was now filming with her phone, narrating loudly. As you can see, board members, they're delaying medical transport to argue about unauthorized residency. This is exactly why we need stricter enforcement. I stepped directly in front of her camera, holding up Mom's police badge and ID. This is Chief Sandra Martinez of the Boston Police Department. My mother. The person whose emergency medical care you're blocking right now. The phone lowered slowly as Deborah's mouth fell open. Chief of... You're making that up. Mike the paramedic glanced at the badge and immediately grabbed his radio. Dispatch, be advised we are transporting Chief Martinez, requesting immediate clearance to Boston General, and notification to the department. The radio crackled back immediately. Copy that. All units be advised, Chief Martinez requires emergency transport. Officers en route to your location. Deborah's face went from red anger to ghostly white in seconds. She fumbled with her keys. I had no idea. Why didn't you say something earlier? Because it shouldn't matter who my mother is, I shouted, tears streaming down my face now. She's a human being who needs help. As if on cue, we heard sirens in the distance. Deborah finally moved her SUV, nearly hitting her own mailbox in her panic. The paramedics quickly loaded Mom into the ambulance, hooking her up to machines that beeped with scary urgency. You can ride with us, Mike told me, his face serious but kind. As I climbed in, I saw 3 police cars screeching into our cul-de-sac, lights flashing. Officer Jenkins, Mom's right hand at the department for years, jumped out of the first car. I'd known him since I was a kid. He used to bring me candy when he visited our house for dinner. What happened? He demanded, his normally friendly face hard with worry. Before I could answer, Deborah stepped forward, suddenly all smiles and concern. Officer, I'm Deborah Williams, HOA president. There was a terrible misunderstanding. I was just trying to maintain our community standards when she blocked the ambulance, one of the neighbors called out. I hadn't even noticed Tom standing on his porch, watching everything. Made them wheel the stretcher all the way around while arguing about HOA rules. Jenkins' face darkened as he looked at Deborah. Did you deliberately obstruct emergency medical services? I didn't know it was the chief, Deborah protested, her voice high and squeaky now. That's not what I asked, Jenkins said coldly. And it shouldn't matter who needs the help. The ambulance driver called out, We need to move now. Go, Jenkins told me. I'll follow with escort. We'll deal with this situation after. As the ambulance doors closed, I caught a last glimpse of our cul-de-sac. Several police officers were now surrounding Deborah. More neighbors had come outside, pointing and talking. Tom was showing something on his phone to one of the officers. Had he recorded the whole thing? The ambulance sped through traffic, sirens blaring. I held Mom's hand, noticing how small and fragile it felt. This strong woman who had raised me alone after Dad died, who had worked her way up through the ranks to become the first female chief of police in our city's history, now fighting for every breath. Hang on, Mom, I whispered. Just hang on. The paramedics worked frantically, checking monitors and adjusting equipment. Her oxygen is stabilizing, Mike said. We'll be at Boston General in 4 minutes. My phone buzzed with a text from our neighbor, Lucy. Everyone's talking about what Deborah did. Tom showed police his doorbell camera footage. She's in big trouble. How's your mom? I couldn't even type a response. All I could think about was Mom. What if we'd been a few minutes later? What if she'd been alone when this happened? The ambulance radio crackled. Boston General standing by. Trauma team ready for Chief Martinez on arrival. As we pulled up to the emergency entrance, I saw a line of police officers standing at attention. News vans were already parked nearby. How did they find out so fast? Through the ambulance windows, I caught a glimpse of the hospital director himself waiting with the trauma team. Mike squeezed my shoulder. Your mom's a fighter, and she's got the whole force behind her. As they wheeled her out, Mom's eyes opened again, finding mine. She squeezed my hand weakly. Don't let Deborah, she whispered, her voice barely audible under the oxygen mask. Don't worry about her now, I said. Mom shook her head slightly. Don't let her hurt anyone else. Even now, barely conscious, she was thinking about protecting others. The doctors rushed forward, surrounding the stretcher with urgent professionalism. As they wheeled her away, one question burned in my mind. How many other people had Deborah bullied and harmed with her power trips? This wasn't just about my mom anymore. This was about stopping a tyrant who thought rules were more important than people's lives. The hospital waiting room was the longest night of my life. I couldn't stop shaking, thinking about those precious minutes lost while Deborah stood there smirking. The doctor finally came out at 5 a.m. with news that Mom was stable. I collapsed into the chair, tears of relief streaming down my face. She's asking for you, the nurse said, touching my shoulder gently. Mom looked so small in the hospital bed. Oxygen tubes in her nose, but her eyes were sharp as ever. Did they arrest her? Were her first words to me. Who, Deborah? I don't know, I've been here all night. Mom pressed a button on her bed, raising herself up slightly. Call Jenkins, now. When I pulled into our neighborhood at 9 a.m., I nearly crashed my car in shock. 3 police cruisers with flashing lights lined my street. Neighbors stood on their porches in robes, clutching coffee mugs, whispering to each other. Officer Jenkins, Mom's right-hand deputy for 15 years, was interviewing Mrs. Patel from across the street. There he is, Jenkins called out when he spotted me. How's the chief? Stable. Furious, but stable. I rubbed my bloodshot eyes. What's happening here? Jenkins' face hardened. Collecting witness statements. Obstructing emergency services is a felony. 5 to 10 years if the victim suffers health complications. He lowered his voice. And nobody messes with our chief. I spotted Tom waving frantically from his driveway and walked over. Dude, this is insane, he whispered. They took Deborah down to the station an hour ago. She was screaming about her rights while they put her in the car. The whole street saw it. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors I'd barely spoken to before. Everyone suddenly wanted to tell me about their own run-ins with Deborah, the Lopez family's children's playhouse. She had removed Mr. Wilson's flowering vines she killed with weed killer because they grew an inch over the property line. The elderly Johnsons who couldn't have their grandsons stay during COVID because of her no extended visitors rule. I was heading inside when a silver Mercedes pulled up. Frank Williams, Deborah's husband, jumped out looking like he hadn't slept. Please, he said, blocking my path. Can we talk? Just 5 minutes. I reluctantly let him in. Frank perched awkwardly on the edge of my couch, twisting his wedding ring. Look, Deborah's been on the HOA board for 8 years. She gets overzealous sometimes, but she's not a bad person. His voice cracked. They're talking about pressing criminal charges. Our kids are terrified. Can't we resolve this without destroying our family? I thought about Mom lying in that hospital bed because his wife couldn't be bothered to move her car. Your wife nearly killed my mother because of a power trip. Frank, tell me why I should help her. Frank's shoulders slumped. I know it's terrible. The HOA is her whole identity. She's worked so hard to keep property values up. He pulled out his phone. She recorded everything last night. She truly thought she was in the right. He played a video showing Deborah's perspective as I banged on her door. You could clearly hear the ambulance sirens, me shouting about the emergency, and Deborah's smug voice saying, "Should have followed the rules." This is evidence against her, you realize that? I said, stunned by how bad it looked. I know. I just wanted you to see she wasn't hiding anything. She really believed she was enforcing the rules. As Frank left, another car pulled up. A sleek black Audi with HOA legal on the license plate. Gregory Pierce, the association's attorney, practically ran to my door. Thank goodness you're home, he said, not waiting for an invitation to enter. The board has called an emergency meeting. We had no idea about your mother's position. Everyone wants to express their deepest apologies. My mother nearly died, I said flatly. Pierce winced. I understand, but perhaps we can come to an arrangement that satisfies everyone without court proceedings. The HOA is prepared to waive all fees, remove all complaints from your record, and... My phone rang, interrupting him. The hospital. My heart stopped. Hello? I answered, turning away from Pierce. Your mother's asking for her laptop and files, the nurse said cheerfully. Says she has work to do. Relief washed over me. Tell her to rest. I'll bring them later. I turned back to Pierce, who was staring at the photos on my wall. Mom in her uniform, receiving commendations, standing with the mayor. That call was the hospital, I said, watching fear flash across his face. You know what's interesting about emergency service obstruction cases, Mr. Pierce? When they involve public officials, federal charges can apply. His face went white. Perhaps the HOA could establish a new emergency vehicle protocol, named after your mother, and a formal apology from the entire board? I showed him to the door. The board meeting is tomorrow at 7, right? We'll be there. After he left, I sat on the porch, watching the police finish collecting statements. Mrs. Patel brought me homemade chai. The Lopezes offered to mow my lawn. Mr. Wilson dropped off a casserole. We never knew your mother was Chief Martinez, Mrs. Patel said. Such an important woman. And that Deborah, she clicked her tongue disapprovingly. My phone lit up with a news alert. HOA president arrested after blocking. Ambulance responding to police chief. As reporters began appearing at the end of our street, I realized this was about to become much bigger than just our neighborhood. What would Mom want me to do? Fight for justice or show mercy to a woman who showed none to us? Walking into the community center, I felt everyone's eyes on us. The room was packed with neighbors I'd barely spoken to before. Mom insisted on wearing her full police uniform despite still looking pale. She gripped my arm tightly as we made our way to the front seats reserved for us. Are you sure you're up for this? I whispered, noticing her unsteady steps. After what she did? Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Mom replied, her voice stronger than I expected. At the front table sat the entire HOA board, including Deborah, who refused to make eye contact with anyone. Her usually perfect hair looked unwashed, and dark circles framed her eyes. The board attorney, Mr. Patterson, kept whispering urgently in her ear. Tom waved at us from across the room. Since that night, he'd stopped by daily to check on Mom, and had gathered signatures from nearly every household, demanding this emergency meeting. The board president, Jeff Wilson, called the meeting to order with nervous taps of his gavel. We're here to address the incident from last Thursday night involving Chief Martinez and board member Williams. Mom squeezed my hand as her name was mentioned. Before we begin formal proceedings, Jeff continued, I want to inform everyone that 3 board members, including myself, have only learned of these events in the past 48 hours. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I hadn't expected the board to split like this. We'll hear first from Sarah Martinez, daughter of Chief Martinez, who will explain what happened. I stood on shaky legs and faced my neighbors. Last Thursday, my mother stopped breathing properly. I called 911. When the ambulance arrived, they couldn't reach our house because Deborah Williams had deliberately parked her SUV blocking my driveway. My voice cracked. The paramedics had to wheel their equipment around the entire cul-de-sac, losing precious minutes while my mother's oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. Gasps echoed through the room. Mrs. Patel, who lived across the street, stood up without being called on. I saw the whole thing from my window. Deborah was standing outside watching while they struggled with that stretcher through the grass. Jeff banged his gavel for order as more neighbors began shouting. What Sarah isn't telling you, Deborah suddenly spoke up, her voice tight, is that they've been violating occupancy rules for months. The chief doesn't live here, she's not on the lease, and my mother was recovering from heart surgery. I shot back. She needed temporary care. Mom tugged at my sleeve. Let me. She slowly stood, and the room fell completely silent. My name is Sandra Martinez. I've served as chief of police for 8 years, and on the force for 27. Last week I nearly died because someone in this room decided HOA rules were more important than human life. Her voice gained strength with each word. While I was being loaded into that ambulance, fighting to breathe, Mrs. Williams was writing up a violation notice. The paramedics have provided sworn statements to this effect. Deborah's face reddened. I didn't know you were the police chief. How was I supposed to? Would it have mattered if I wasn't? Mom interrupted. If I were a teacher? A store clerk? Would my life have been worth less? The room erupted in applause. Someone in the back shouted, Resign, Deborah! Mr. Patterson stood. Chief Martinez, my client deeply regrets the misunderstanding. We're prepared to offer— This wasn't a misunderstanding, Officer Jenkins called from the doorway. I hadn't noticed him arrive with 3 other uniformed officers. Willfully blocking emergency services is a felony under state law. We have enough evidence to move forward with charges. Panic flashed across Deborah's face. You can't be serious. Over a parking dispute? Over attempted manslaughter, Jenkins corrected coldly. Frank Williams, Deborah's husband who I'd barely seen before, approached the front. Please, there must be another way to resolve this. My wife made a terrible mistake, but she's not a criminal. Mom exchanged looks with Officer Jenkins before addressing the crowd. I didn't come here seeking vengeance. I came seeking change. She pulled out a folder. These are safety protocols used by HOAs across the country, ensuring medical emergencies are handled properly. No harassment of residents with medical needs. No blocking emergency vehicles. No fines for medical equipment. She set the folder on the table. I won't press charges on one condition. These protocols are implemented immediately. And Mrs. Williams steps down from the board. The remaining board members looked at each other, then at Deborah. Jeff cleared his throat. I motioned to accept Chief Martinez's proposal and implement these safety protocols. Second, another board member quickly added. All in favor? Jeff asked. Nearly every hand in the room shot up. Deborah's shoulders slumped as she gathered her things. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, she muttered. But her threat sounded hollow. As she stood to leave, Tom stepped forward. Before you go, Deborah, I think everyone should know about the other violations. You've been selectively enforcing. He unfolded a large document. I've reviewed all HOA complaints from the past year. Interesting pattern. Residents, who opposed your personal projects, received violation notices at 3 times the rate of your friends. More angry voices filled the room. I hadn't expected this twist. That's slander, Deborah snapped, but Jeff was already reviewing Tom's paperwork with wide eyes. We'll need to review all fines issued in the past year, Jeff announced. Deborah pushed past everyone and stormed out, Frank trailing behind apologetically. After the meeting adjourned, Neighbors I'd never spoken to came up to introduce themselves. Mrs. Patel brought homemade soup. Tom and his wife invited us for dinner once Mom felt stronger. I never knew my neighbors before this, I told Mom as we walked home slowly. It took something terrible to bring us together. 2 weeks later, the new board invited Mom to consult on their emergency protocols, which they named the Martinez Safety Initiative. Deborah and Frank put their house up for sale, unable to face the community. The most surprising change came a month later when I received a certified letter. The HOA was refunding all medical-related fines they'd ever collected and apologizing to affected residents. That evening, as Mom and I sat on the porch watching kids play in the cul-de-sac, she smiled. You know, sometimes it takes one person standing up to a bully to change everything. You mean you? I asked. No, she squeezed my hand. You. You fought for me before anyone knew I was chief. That's real courage. As fall turned to winter, Mom recovered enough to return to her own home. But she visited often. I was elected to the new HOA board, where I made sure no family would ever face what we did. Sometimes, when I drive past Deborah's old house, now owned by a lovely family with twins, I think about how one person's cruelty led to an entire community finding its heart, and I wonder if Deborah ever realized that the real power never came from HOA rules, but from neighbors who finally decided to care for each other.